Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on preparing for EPA with Aptem. We've still got a number of people entering GoToWebinar as it stands at the minute, so we're just going to give it a couple of minutes briefly and then we'll get started. Okay, so it seems like the majority of people are in now. So once again, welcome to the webinar. To help you make the most of this session, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Aptem Help Centre in due course, so you can share it with colleagues if you so wish. Everybody on the webinar today is muted, so if you need any assistance, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of GoToWebinar. And there will also be an opportunity during this webinar for questions to be asked. We do request that you ask questions throughout the webinar to give us the best chance of answering them, and we will have a live Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and we will raise these questions to share with everybody as well. If we don't have the opportunity, however, to answer all questions during this session, we will ensure that every question that is asked is followed up afterwards. So just to introduce myself and Georgina today. So my name is James Lett. I'm Product Operations Manager here at Aptem, and I've been here for 4 years, but prior to that was working in the vocational training sector, managing large and small providers. My colleague today, Georgina, and co-presenter, is Head of Implementation here at Aptem and has worked in the college and training provider space for many years. I shall hand over to Georgina to take us through the first part of the webinar. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning, James, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on preparing for EPA in Aptem. It's great to have you all here. We do know that preparing for endpoint assessment can be a complex process, and our goal today is to show you how Aptem can make that process smoother and more efficient. We'll be walking through some key Aptem features that support EPA preparation, from designing programs for portfolio exports to managing EPA components, setting goals. We'll also look at how to integrate with epaPRO, handle gateway reviews, and track final completions. The session's all about providing practical guidance, so we want you to leave feeling confident about how to use Aptem to streamline EPA preparation, stay compliant, and ultimately improve outcomes for your learners. As James mentions, we'll have time at the end for questions, so please feel free to ask anything that comes to mind as we go along using the questions tab, and we'll answer these either directly or at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, let's get started by looking at how to design programs and manage EPA components effectively. When designing your apprenticeship program, it's important to think ahead about the evidence you'll need for endpoint assessment. Evidence can be gathered both during practical learning period and also through dedicated endpoint assessment components added towards the end of the program. Careful planning at the program design stage can make evidence collection at the end far more efficient. For instance, by structuring activities to reflect key assessment methods, you can ensure that required evidence is naturally gathered and organised as the learner progresses through the program. This approach not only simplifies the process for learners, but also supports you in ensuring readiness for endpoint assessment. For programs where the endpoint assessment includes a portfolio, it's crucial to plan how evidence will be identified and collated. And there are a few approaches to consider for this. One is evidence naming conventions, where learners are guided to name their uploads consistently. This is really important if your endpoint assessment organisation has strict rules about evidence file names that you'll need to adhere to at portfolio stage. However, this approach does rely on learners following instructions precisely, so can lead to some inconsistencies. Another option is to think about your learning plan activity naming conventions and actually build them into the learning plan structure, so you've got clear signposts for where specific evidence should be uploaded. This helps learners associate their evidence with the correct learning plan activity, and also allows you, by filtering on the activity name, to easily gather relevant evidence to include in your download. The third option you may want to consider would be to use a specific portfolio mapping criteria set, and bespoke criteria sets can be built within Aptem, directly linking evidence to EPA requirements. Although this method requires dual mapping to both standard and EPA criteria, it does provide a clear structure for identifying relevant EPA portfolio evidence. Each approach can be tailored to suit the program, helping ensure that when it's time for EPA, the required portfolio is well organised and ready for submission. And what I'd like to do is show a few of those approaches within Aptem. So first of all, I'm going to have a look at Albert. And Albert has got his learning plan structured so that the activity naming convention is supporting the endpoint assessment. Just bear with me a second. This is a joy of running a live demo. And I should have checked that I wasn't being timed out while I was preparing for this webinar. So when we designed Albert's learning plan, we've actually created activities that have both got, but both for his module tuition and also for the portfolio. So throughout Albert's learning plan, he has had specific activities to be able to upload evidence for his portfolio. If I now go to Albert's evidence summary, I can actually see the evidence and document names, and he has actually differentiated by document name what's evidence and what's portfolio submission. But I can also see through the component names what component, what activity that evidence has been uploaded against. Within this evidence summary grid, I can then sort by component name. So I can filter out what evidence has been added to a general teaching and learning module and what evidence has been added to a portfolio model. And by selecting the portfolio models at this stage, the portfolio activities at this stage to include in my portfolio, when I go to export the portfolio, what I will then see is only that evidence mapped to the standard. And we can see here how that evidence has been pre-selected because of what I did in the stage before. When I then go to export the portfolio, and actually download the zip file, it will just be those portfolio evidence items that are included. What that will then look like in the zip file is I get a file that I can extract with all the evidence folded in folders, and when I go to the index, what it then shows me is all the different pieces of evidence, but also against the standard, I can see where they've been mapped to the various knowledge, skills and behaviours, and it's all clearly identifiable with each of the evidence titles being a hyperlink into the actual piece of evidence contained. So that's one example where I've used the learning plan component names to easily help me identify what is portfolio evidence and what is general evidence. Albert has also been very good with the naming convention, and I could also at this stage sort by document name, which would also help me separate evidence from portfolio work. But that bit is reliant on the learner uploading the evidence with the right name, whereas the component name is within your control. The next learner I'd like to look at is a slightly different approach that we've used with Winston. And in Winston's learning plan, we have actually attached both a standard and a specific criteria set for the portfolio. This criteria set you can request to be built and they would be built as a bespoke qualification, but it can then be added to the learning plan and mapped at component level. So if I look at module 3, I've actually got this criteria set mapped both to the standard and the portfolio with my pre-mapping. And as a tutor, I could add it to a portfolio, add any evidence to a portfolio mapping at any stage. What this then allows me to do is not only be able to easily view against the portfolio EPA criteria which different pieces of evidence have been included, but I can also go to the evidence summary. And in this stage, rather than guessing which bits of evidence are mapped to the portfolio, if I go to export portfolio and then just select evidence that's mapped to that portfolio criteria set, it will then only pull the pieces of evidence that have been mapped into that portfolio, not the bits of evidence that have been mapped into the general standard. So we can see here we've got evidence 3, evidence 4. These are the pieces of evidence that have been mapped to the portfolio. Similarly, when I export the portfolio for Winston, what it will show me is the same zip file, which if I extract will then take me into the evidence mapping. And again, because I only brought out what was mapped to the portfolio, it will just show me that similar mapping, and I can go in at evidence level to actually find which pieces of evidence have been mapped to each portfolio item. So just a couple of different approaches that we can take within Aptem, either by having the separate criteria set for the portfolio, or like we've done with Winston, having one, as we've done with Albert, having one portfolio set, but actually within the learning plan components themselves, using that naming convention to show me what is a general piece of evidence and what needs to be considered for the portfolio. Another thing to remember is that the learning plan doesn't have to end at Gateway. You can continue to use Aptem to manage and track activities related to the EPA process itself. For example, you can add activities that reflect specific EPA methods, whether it's projects, interviews, or presentations. And once the different EPA elements are booked, tasks can be assigned to log these in the learner's Aptem calendar to ensure that the learner is prepared and progressing as appropriate. This approach helps you manage the EPA journey within Aptem, ensuring that both learners and tutors have a clear view of the next steps and the expectations. It also helps capture the learner's progression in a structured and auditable way. And I'm just going to go back and have a look at Albert's portfolio, because Albert has now got to the stage where he's going into EPA, and I'm just going to filter out and just look at his EPA components to show you the approach that we've taken for that. So we can see here that Albert has got 3 different EPA components built into his program for the 3 different assessment methods on the standard that he's studying. They were all due by the 30th of April, and that was the relative date of the 18 months on programme and 3 months EPA period. But what we've actually done with this first module is we have booked a task that has actually brought the due date of that through to today. And within those task details, we've been able to give him instructions about that endpoint assessment that's been booked for him today. So even though the due date hasn't changed, because that was the relative date set at the start of the program, we've managed to bring the actual date forward by today. And if I look in Albert's calendar, I can see that assignment there, and I can also see the instructions within the assignment. It is possible, because we've made a task or calendar appointment for this, to give Albert a reminder. At the moment, this is set 2 days before, but we could set that reminder any time up to a week before, so that Albert's getting that nudge, that notification that his endpoint assessment assignment is due today. Once Albert's completed that assessment, we've then got a couple of options. We can add a note into that assignment to say that he's passed or needs to resit it. And we can then complete each element. So if I just put that he passed and save that, what I can then do is complete the component. And that will then show me in Albert's learning plan. Oh no, I just need to mark that. So bear with me 2 seconds. So if I just mark that as completed. And then I can complete the component to show that Albert has now passed his first element of his endpoint assessment. Similarly, I could refer that if he needs to do a resit, and I could rebook that task for him. So I can actually then start to show incremental progress against each assessment method. I could pull in results, or I could pull in reports as I'm adding the evidence for that. So just some ideas of how you can use your learning plan design to monitor both on-program learning, evidence collation, and endpoint assessment elements. I'm now going to hand over to James, who's going to pick up the next section of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Georgina. And what we're going to look at next is the assessing readiness and setting goals sections of Aptem as well. So the first section that I want to draw your attention to is the skills radar. Skills radar is not just for initial assessment. It can be used to track ongoing assessment of the learner by the learner, the employer, and the tutor. Another functionality that we have within the skills radar is the ability to set goals and set targets within those grading criteria that you set up, which we're going to demonstrate shortly. Next slide, please. Also within the assessing readiness and setting goals functionality, we have Aptem Checkpoint. Aptem Checkpoint is part of our enterprise package and one of our latest enhanced offerings. What Aptem Checkpoint allows you to do is it allows you to ask questions of the learner based around the KSBs throughout their program. However, we see real value in setting an all KSB checkpoint towards the end of a learner's program in order to check for readiness for endpoint assessment, or at least give an indication for that. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do shortly is we're going to just give you a quick demonstration of both of these as well. So I'm just going to take the screen. And I'm going to be working with Albert Einstein as well today. So the first thing that I'm going to demonstrate to you is the skills radar. When you go into the learner's profile and on the ellipsis, you'll see the skills radar here. This is also present during reviews and review documentation as well. As you can see here, I've got a historic tutor assessment of Albert at scores of 2 throughout the program. So I believe Albert is at a 2. What I can do, however, is rescore him, say that he has some prior experience, for example, but that I want him to achieve at least a 5 in this section of the review, and I can set the goal to be a 5. Once I've done that and click save, I'll get the current score, and I'm just going to show the history so you can see the indication there. And what you should be able to see, but I'm just going to zoom in for, is there is a dotted line over the 5 as well here, and the status has moved to working towards. What that means is that the learner has not yet achieved the desired standard that we would expect or we're targeting Albert to achieve. When we do reassess the duty, we can click on 5 to say that we're happy, obviously during a period of time, that they've now achieved that. And if I click save, that duty then moves to achieved because they've achieved the goal of getting to 5 that we set for them. This is really great use to be able to stretch and challenge learners so they can see what they're working towards, where their targets are, what more they need to learn, and allows you to flex that targeting for each individual learner as well. Just completing the learning plan doesn't mean that somebody is confident as another person or as another learner around that duty. So you can use these to stretch and challenge. What you can also do is you can move that goal. So should we say that actually this learner is now at a 5 and we've still got time on program, so we want them to be a 6, we can change that again. It will go back to working towards again until the learner achieves that. Or alternatively, the goal is removed at that point. So we're going to put this to a 6, just click save, and the learner has now achieved that goal. We also have a checkpoint within the system. So what I'm going to do for Albert here is I'm going to demonstrate how you would create that checkpoint. Now we have automatic and we have periodic creations of checkpoint, but Aptem's not going to know necessarily when the learner is ready for endpoint assessment or is approaching that last couple of months of their program. So in order to do that, you would come into the learner profile, you would go to the checkpoint section, and you can create a checkpoint. You can give it whatever name you want it to call it. We're going to call this EPA checkpoint, for example. And you set your parameters at this stage. So we can set the number of theory questions that we want to ask. We could say, actually, we don't want to ask theory questions. We just want to ask scenario-based questions, for example. And you can map that to as many of the KSBs as you wanted to. But for the purpose of this, we would map it to every single KSB within the criteria and create that checkpoint for that learner. Now, if we set it at 1, there's going to be approximately 51 questions during this KSB set, but it does then create that for the learner. When you click on Create Checkpoint, you'll get a notification into the bottom left-hand corner to say that that checkpoint has been successfully created. Once the learner has completed that checkpoint, you will be able to see the results of the checkpoint that has been completed. Now, here's one that I've done earlier for demonstration purposes. And here we can see the score. We can see that the learner scored 36 out of 51. I just asked scenario-based questions at the time. And we can see here what questions were answered correctly. And if I drill down, you can see what is correct, what answer was given, and an explanation as to why that is the correct answer. Where an answer is incorrect, it will tell you the answer that was given by the learner, what the feedback was to that learner because they got that question incorrect, and it also provides the correct answer and an explanation of that as well. So you're then able to pick this up with a learner either in a review or by setting additional work for the learner to complete prior to them going towards their endpoint assessment. So a really useful tool in the Aptem Armory in order to indicate whether a learner is truly ready for endpoint assessment or not. If we can go back to the presentation, please, Georgina.
I'm just popping that screen on.
Thank you very much.
Go-to is being a little bit slow on screen sharing today. There you go, James.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. So we're now going to talk about managing the endpoint assessment process as well. Now, we have registration and certification within Aptem, and what that allows you to do is track the progress of mandatory qualifications for learners. However, it will also add any ILR aims that exist within the ILR for each learner. And most learners on program will have a zoo component or at least another component aim that is a generic component aim. Now, what this allows you to do, if you were to use this, is you could track the registration for endpoint assessment in registration and certification if that's what you wanted to do as well. Next slide, please. So we're just going to demonstrate that for you briefly as well. So I'll take that back. So we're in the registration and certification page here for Albert. And we can see here that there is a generic regulated provision for his level 5 teaching and lecturing qualification, which is essentially a component aim that sits in the ILR because there has to be at least one component aim within the ILR alongside the main program aim. As a result of the build within Aptem, the qualification status is registration not required. And if we drill down, you can see the planned achievement date in here as well, and whether it is been claimed or received. What we are able to do here, though, is we are able to say whether the learner is registered, and we can put in the registration number. This could be your endpoint assessment registration number for that learner at this point. So we're just going to put in 1234. And you can put in the registration date as well here. So if the planned achievement, we're a bit behind, registration date for EPA here, and the planned achievement date appears in here. Once you click on save, you are going to be able to see the qualification status for that zoo code, for that endpoint assessment essentially, and the registration date and number. Now, if you had a series of learners, you'd be able to filter by all of these as well by clicking on filters and being able to see the qualification status, registration dates, and certification dates at this point in time. You can move learners through this process as well, and you can move them all through in bulk using the import functionality that we've got. But once registered, you can move them to qualification achieved, put in achievement dates, certificate claimed as well, so when they've received their certification, etc., all the way through to certificate sent. So I'm just going to put some dates in here. You can upload a copy of the certificate as well to keep, so you know for audit purposes that it's been sent, and also your postal tracking reference number as well if you're issuing the learner's final certificate. All that information will then populate in registration and certification and allow you to see this as a database essentially for all learners once they've completed their endpoint assessment to see exactly where they're up to. What's also useful about this is that when you go into the program details for each learner, all of this information is tracked at learner progress, at learner level as well. So you can't update the registration here. You can only do that from the registration page. However, all the information is then visible. So any admins that do not have access to the registration and certification functionality can still see the updated functionality within each learner's view. We're just going to go back to the slides, please, Georgina. Thank you very much. Also part of the endpoint assessment process is our epaPRO integration. So what we're going to look at briefly is how to set this up, and there is support within our help center that allows you to do this in detail as well. Where your endpoint assessment organization is not using epaPRO, however, you can use the user generic reports that exist within Aptem in order to create a spreadsheet, if you like, a database of information that could be used to inform the endpoint assessment organization of learners and their statuses with endpoint assessment. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go back into Aptem, and I'm going to show you the endpoint assessment integration. Where this doesn't exist for you, you need to speak to either your implementation consultant or support, and a request will be made for this to be added for you. This exists within the settings section of Aptem, so you must make sure that you've got the manage tenant settings permission as well, and sits under the integration section at the top here. And if we click on that, pardon me, you'll see here that we've got enable endpoint assessment switched on, and we've got the enable learners registration email enabled as well. Simply what you do once this has been created, you click on add connection and you add all the relevant details, including your username, passwords, endpoint assessment ID, API endpoint, client ID, client secret, etc., and standards and specialisms in here. Now, we haven't got this populated on this tenancy at the minute because this is a test tenancy. However, when we go back to the slides, I'm going to show you the interaction that works within epaPRO. What you can also do, however, if I switch over, I have gone into Classic, and when you go to Users Generic Report here at the bottom, you will see a page like this. And what I have done is I've created an endpoint assessment registration report. And I've used the reporting fields within here to kind of recreate what I would expect the endpoint assessment organization information to be able to be provided. So I've selected full name, I've selected email, I've got the standard code for the standard that the learners are completed. I've got the apprenticeship start date. I've got the program type filtered to 25 because that is apprenticeship standard in the ILR. And I've got endpoint assessment organization ID here. So if I wanted to inform all of the EPA 0166 learners, then I can pop that into the box here and it will filter all of those out and just give me all of those learners that belong to that endpoint assessment organization. I can edit this as well, so I can change the fields and put as many fields in as I want to that I need to inform the EPAO of whilst I am registering. And because I've got the data export function, I can click on Quick Sheet. This is going to generate then a Aptem Excel file essentially. And once again, because I've got the data export function, I can click on export here and it's going to allow me to either export it off Aptem into a downloadable file, which I can then upload to an endpoint assessment organization portal, either in XLS format or a PDF format as well. And then I can import all the information where required into that endpoint assessment organization. If we can go back to the slides briefly, Georgina. Thank you very much. So the final page that we've got here as well is a demonstration of what the endpoint assessment, epaPRO, integration looks like and how it interacts with the learner once they're registered. So once the endpoint assessment is, once the EPAO is registered through epaPRO in the integration within Aptem, all of the information moves from epaPRO back into Aptem as well. So you can see here from this page, this is a sample that we've got, how the planning meetings, how the assessment plans and how the assessment results all move back to Aptem from epaPRO. So you can see whether things have been verified, when they were last updated, if they were cancelled, completed, etc. So it keeps you fully in the loop as a tutor within Aptem or as an admin within Aptem on how you can manage that learner and support that learner and see what that learner is achieving whilst in endpoint assessment without needing to log into epaPRO directly and be able to see the progress of that learner's endpoint assessment process. If anybody wanted any more information about the epaPRO integration, then we will share the Help Center pages as part of this webinar when we post it onto their Help Center as well and redirect people to those to have more information. But thank you very much, everybody, today, and I'll hand back over to Georgina.
Thank you very much, James. So I am going to look at the final section of this webinar by looking at gateway reviews, and they are a crucial quality checkpoint in the apprenticeship journey. I'll also go and look at completion tracking. So before a learner can progress to endpoint assessment, it's essential to confirm they've met all mandatory requirements. This includes reviewing evidence, confirming completion of qualifications, and ensuring that all off-the-job hours have been completed. With Aptem, bespoke gateway reviews can be designed at program level, and that allows you to manage gateway conversations effectively and ensure a strong audit trail at the point of gateway sign-off. Additionally, the reviews could be used to collect EPA-specific information, such as gateway declarations and gateway forms. And most major EPAOs have approved the use of Aptem's review documents for gateway declarations, provided they contain the same essential information as on their standard forms. This approach helps ensure consistency, accuracy, and compliance while supporting a smooth transition into your EPA stage. So I've got some screenshots of an example gateway review form, and I've based this on a Pearson standard form Annex A gateway declaration form. The initial section will pull through standard learner information and program information that you see on the start of every review. You can then include text steps and custom sections to bring in information required for EPA-specific gateway forms, including images and questions that need answers for them. We have discussed EPA with EPAOs about this approach, and the general guidance we've had is that as long as all relevant information is included on the form, The exact format and layout does not need to match their original document. As with other review documents in Aptem, signatures from any party can be collected electronically, and the final signed document will be stored as a PDF so that they can be downloaded and sent to the EPAO. The final stage of the journey is to record the completion of your apprenticeship in your ILR. Managing apprenticeship completions manually can be time-consuming and increase the risk of data errors. Aptem's completion process automation is designed to simplify this. By automating routine tasks, it should significantly reduce administrative effort and ensure accuracy throughout. This doesn't only save valuable time, but it reduces the risk of errors that can lead to funding or compliance issues. Additionally, process automation means every change is securely tracked, providing a comprehensive audit trail, giving you peace of mind that processes are both efficient and compliant. The automation can be triggered when a learner enters either the endpoint assessment period or completes their program. At this point, key fields are automatically updated, and you can include details like actual end date, off-the-job hours, achievement date, outcome, and completion status. The process follows a clear workflow. A tutor or administrator initiates the tracker, which is then reviewed and pre-authorized, and then a senior person completes the final processing. Automated notifications ensure that all stakeholders are kept informed throughout. The structured approach not only streamlines the process, but ensures accuracy and accountability. The benefits are substantial. It saves considerable time by removing the need for manual data entry, allowing staff to focus on more strategic tasks. It also reduces the risk of errors, and particularly important for maintaining funding compliance and ensuring that avoiding issues that could arise from incorrect data. And finally, the process is fully auditable. Every change made is recorded, providing a clear and reliable trail of actions. It should give you confidence in your process, knowing you're well prepared for any audits or reviews. In essence, it's about enhancing efficiency, ensuring accuracy, and supporting compliance, all through a streamlined automated process. I'm just going to show you how this works by a series of screenshots. So the first stage will be to create a completion of program tracker. The tracker will be available once all regulated component aims have been completed, for example, mandatory qualifications or functional skills aims. And the tracker will support the completion of any non-regulated aims if used as part of the apprenticeship ILR record, such as your zoo aims. If you have regulated aims as part of your apprenticeship, you might want to consider using the completion of component aim process automation tracker that can be used as soon as those criteria sets for those aims are showing as 100% complete. I'm not going to cover the completion of component aims today, but we have done previous webinars that you can reference to see that. The tracker supports different types of completion in Aptem, depending on the stage of the learner journey. It can be used after Gateway to correctly complete the ILR after the practical period, and then you'd raise a second tracker to show the completion of the overall EPA period in the apprenticeship. The third option is to do both of those options together by selecting that bottom final option to complete the practical period and assessment period at the same time. As you go down the tracker, information will be pulled from the learner progress in Aptem, but that can be checked and amended in this if required. In this example, I've selected to complete the practical period, so need to enter an end date for the practical period, which will also be used to close the non-regulated aim for this learner. We can then see the off-the-job hours section, and the off-the-job hours completed in the learning plan will be shown, and the value will populate the actual off-the-job hours in the ILR. If you wish to amend that figure, you can do, and it's a figure you put into the box on the actual off-the-job hours that is the one that will be used when the tracker is processed. As with other process automation trackers, you can use the built-in approval process to raise, pre-approve, and process the tracker, with each stage being permission-based. All interactions are recorded on the audit history of the tracker, maintaining a strong audit trail. Processing the tracker at this stage will set the outcome to 8 and leave the completion status as 1, and will update the program status of the learner to enter the EPI. Running the tracker a second time at the end of the EPA period will allow all relevant changes to be made to fully complete the learner, including updating the program status and all relevant contract fields. And if I just have a look at what Albert's program looked like after I applied this tracker, we can see that his program status has gone to entered EPA. And if I check into his ILR record, we can see the actual end date, outcome, and actual off-the-job hours have all been correctly updated according to the information in the tracker. And that's it. With just a few clicks, we've processed the learner's gateway completion in a way that is efficient, accurate, and fully auditable. And the automation should not only reduce admin time, but also ensure data integrity and compliance, because we're all aware of the multiple fields you have to update when you are doing learner completions. So at that stage, I'll hand over to James, and we're going to have a look and see if we've got any questions that we need to answer live. James, has there anything that we can share?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a number of questions, Georgina. Bear with me 1 second. Just trying to filter them out. Okay, so the first one is regards to the portfolio criteria. So are we able to set up the portfolio criteria as a provider, or is this something we need to request Aptem to support with?
As with any criteria sets, we will actually build those for you and put them into Aptem. You would need to raise a qualification request either through the Help Centre or via your CSM. And we need the information as to the portfolio criteria set you want to be built for you. There are some already in Aptem, but if it's something bespoke to you, then we can build a bespoke criteria set for you as well. So it is something we need to build for you, but if you reach out to your CSM or raise a support ticket, the team will be able to support you with that query.
Thank you very much. We've had a question come through about checkpoint as well. So who creates the checkpoint questions? Is this Aptem or the training provider?
Well, as with any Aptem reviews, you can have full autonomy in creating your own review questions. So you can create a gateway review, and you can use custom sections or custom questions within that gateway review to match your requirement or your EPAO's requirements. So you may well have to have a different gateway review for each of your EPAOs and for each of your standards, because the requirements could be different for each of those. We do have some preset sections that you might want to pull into that gateway review, but Aptem's fully flexible review functionality does allow you to customize those in the way you need to suit your learner and EPAO journey.
Perfect, thank you. And with regards to the questions that Checkpoint creates as well, so just to answer that for Rebecca, if the questions that the Checkpoint generates is actually part of our AI functionality. So we've used large language models to create those questions and answers for learners to answer within there as well. So technically, I guess the answer is Aptem, but we have employed large language models in order to support us with that as well.
Sorry, James, did I misunderstand that question?
No, it's quite all right. It's not a problem. I think it's worth noting both, if I'm completely honest. Another question that's come up with regards to the epaPRO integration is this an additional add-on? Is this extra?
So it will depend on the package you're on. It is classed as one of our standard integrations, and any customers on one of the new gold or platinum packages do get 3 standard integrations as part of their package. If you're already using 3 standard integrations, it can be added as an add-on to that. If you're still on a legacy package, then you will need to speak to your CSM to discuss getting access to that integration. But for a lot of customers, it can easily be included as one of their 3 standard integrations if they're on a package that allows that.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Georgina. And then another question with regards to the epaPRO integration is, which EPAOs does it link with?
So it will link with any EPAO that uses epaPRO as their administrative platform. So if you are currently managing your EPA journey through epaPRO, then you'll be able to use the epaPRO integration. If you're not, it's worth reaching out to your EPAO to see whether that's something that they're interested in maybe considering.
Perfect. Thank you very much. There are a number of additional questions that have come through most recently, but what I will ask is with regards to the completion tracker, Georgina, it has been asked is if any of the information that goes into the completion tracker actually feeds into the ILR itself.
So yes, basically depending on the fields you fill in, when this ILR was completed, the actual off the job hours, the learning actual end date was coming from the information you entered into the into the completion tracker. When you go for the end of program completion automation, the achievement date, the contract end date would also pull from that EPA, that completion tracker, as would the completion status and the outcome. So the different fields you enter in the tracker will then directly update your ILR for you in the relevant way. So the idea of the tracker is it's collating the information in a very easy to understand way and then using that information when it's doing your ILR updates to make sure the right fields are updated at the right time.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Just another couple that we've got. There's been one question come in if you're using gateway forms, where could these be uploaded into Aptem?
So again, gateway forms can be uploaded into a variety of places. I know some customers have created a gateway activity and uploaded forms into the documents or evidence within that. Um, Within the completion tracker, there is a documents area. You might want to consider that. You could also have a custom compliance document folder where you could upload gateway forms. There are quite a number of different options based on basically your program design and how you're using Aptem. For any of those bespoke type questions, it's worth reaching out to your CSM for advice. If they feel that you need some additional support, they can arrange to get an IC on a call with you to maybe run through your options and your configuration options in a little bit more detail.
Perfect. And then finally, Georgina, it was understood by one participant that they believe the portfolio could only be exported once. So can you just confirm for me if it is once that the portfolio can be exported or
No,
can be exported multiple times?
the portfolio can be exported multiple times. There is also the option for both a tutor and a learner to export their portfolio. So if your learners are preparing for endpoint assessment, you can encourage them to export their own portfolio evidence out of Aptem. When you export the portfolio, it goes into a zip file. And then that zip file, you can extract the information. And once you've extracted, then the index page. So this is an extracted version of the portfolio. The index page in that portfolio then gives you a really nice mapping document it looks a bit like the old classic portfolio mapping, but it gives you this mapping document that makes all the hyperlinks work. You do need to extract the zip file for this file to work as expected. So it does store locally on your computer. Once extracted, you can then use the mapping document, but it can be done multiple times at any point in the journey. And like you say, it can be exported by both tutor and learner as well. So it's a very interactive and useful tool.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I have got a few other questions that are appearing in the question function. However, they're quite specific. So what we will do is we'll make sure that any questions that have not yet been answered that are reached out to, and that any CSMs are contacting those customers as well. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and I do appreciate, I've seen a couple of questions about maybe the speed and volume of content. We have covered quite a few different areas on this webinar. The recording will be made available on the Help Centre within the next few days, along with any sort of unanswered or pertinent questions. So do look out for that, and then you'll be able to watch it again and also go through to any relevant bits where maybe we moved a little bit fast today. You'll be able to watch that at your leisure at a later date. So apologies if we've covered quite a lot and gone quite fast, but we just wanted to show you all the different practical options you could consider when preparing for endpoint assessment.
Thank you very much. So that just leaves us to say to talk about some upcoming webinars that we've got. If we can move on, please, Georgina. Thank you very much. So, just to let you know, we have a product roadmap update on Tuesday next week. That will be with our product owners and head of product, Dan Tiffany, giving an update on where we are with our features and functionality within Aptem and what's upcoming. There will also be another webinar on the 1st of April where we will be talking about the communications connector for Microsoft Teams and going through the specific latest feature updates for that. And then on Tuesday, the 29th of April, we'll be running a short course delivery for non-apprenticeship learners webinar as well, and educating people on how that can best work within Aptem. Again, so that just leaves us to say thank you very much to everybody for attending today. And again, as Georgina said, this recording will be made available in the Aptem Help Centre in due course as well. So please look out for that. We will also post some of the questions and answers that we've given within that post. So again, please look out for those for any support that we can give you. And once again, thank you to you, Georgina, for today. And we wish you all the best Thursday. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for attending. And like I say, please do get in touch with us or your CSM if you need any further guidance.